Joel Osteen told security to remove Ibrahim Traoré, then he did this. Joel Osteen's church was always filled with people on Sunday mornings. The building was huge, shining with bright lights, and designed like a modern arena. Thousands of men, women, and children from different places came to hear him speak every week. Families came early to find good seats. Some carried Bibles, some carried notebooks, and others came simply to enjoy the music and atmosphere. The ushers guided people with smiles, showing them where to sit. The choir sang softly as the room prepared for the service to begin. The television crew moved their cameras into position because the service was going to be broadcast to millions of viewers at home. Everything seemed perfect and smooth, just as it usually did. But on that morning, something unusual happened. A man walked quietly into the church. He didn't come with bodyguards or assistants. He didn't wear a shining suit or carry a big Bible. Instead, he wore a simple shirt, dark pants, and shoes that looked plain compared to the expensive ones many others wore. He moved with calmness and respect, not rushing, not looking around for attention. He simply wanted to sit down and listen. That man was Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the leader of Burkina Faso, but no one in the church seemed to recognize him. Ibrahim had come to the United States for a few meetings and conferences. His schedule was full, but he decided to take time on Sunday to visit Joel Osteen's famous church. He had heard many people talk about the place, about its size, its music, and its messages. But more than that, he wanted to understand how faith and leadership work together in this country. As a leader himself, he carried heavy responsibilities back home, responsibilities of serving his people, guiding a nation, and building a future for millions. Yet, he wanted to sit quietly like any other believer, without special treatment. He entered the church like an ordinary visitor. When the ushers asked him where he wanted to sit, he simply walked closer to the front and chose a seat. Some ushers tried to guide him to a different row, further back, but he politely declined. He didn't argue, he didn't raise his voice, he only smiled gently and said, "This seat is fine." Then he sat down. From the stage, Joel Osteen noticed the man. Joel was used to seeing people dressed in their best clothes. His church attracted businessmen, families, and even celebrities who sometimes visited. But this man in plain clothing stood out. Joel leaned slightly toward one of his assistants and whispered a question. The assistant shook his head, not knowing who the man was. Another staff member also looked confused. To them, he seemed like a stranger who had taken a seat where special guests usually sat. Joel Osteen valued order. He wanted everything to look smooth for the cameras and for the thousands watching. He leaned closer to his team again and said quietly, "Ask security to handle it. We don't want any disturbance today." His voice wasn't loud, but the message was clear. He didn't know who the man was, but he thought it might be safer to move him away before the service started. Two members of the security team, dressed in black suits, began walking down the aisle. They moved politely but firmly, with the serious expressions of people used to following instructions. As they reached the row where Ibrahim sat, the congregation noticed. People began whispering to each other. Heads turned, eyes followed, and small murmurs spread like ripples across the hall. The guard stopped beside Ibrahim and leaned down to speak with him. "Sir," one of them said in a low voice, "we need you to step outside with us." Ibrahim looked up calmly. He didn't appear shocked or angry. His eyes were steady, and his face carried the calmness of someone who had seen bigger storms in life. Without resisting, without asking questions, he gave a small nod and stood up. The guards guided him toward the aisle. The whispers grew louder in the audience. Some people thought the man must have done something wrong. Others thought he was simply sitting in the wrong section. No one, except Ibrahim himself, knew the truth. To them, he was just an ordinary man being escorted out of the service. But there was one small detail that began to change the mood. As Ibrahim walked down the aisle, guided by the guards, he walked with dignity. His posture was straight, his face calm, his steps neither rushed nor slow. He didn't look like someone embarrassed or guilty. Instead, he looked like someone who accepted what was happening with peace. This made some people curious. They wondered, who is this man? Why does he look so calm? From the stage, Joel Osteen watched as Ibrahim moved closer to the exit. He still didn't know who the man was. His focus was on keeping the service perfect, and he thought the situation was under control. But in the crowd, something unexpected was about to happen. A young boy, no more than 10 years old, sat near the middle rows with his family. He had been watching everything with wide eyes. When he saw Ibrahim being escorted, something inside him stirred. The boy tugged at his father's sleeve and whispered urgently, "Dad, I know him. That's Captain Ibrahim Traoré." The father frowned and tried to quiet his son. "Shh, be quiet," he said softly. But the boy couldn't hold back. He stood up slightly and said louder, "Wait. I know him. He's a leader." Several heads turned toward the boy. The sound carried across the church, and soon more people looked at their phones, trying to confirm the boy's words. The murmurs grew stronger. The guards escorting Ibrahim slowed their steps, confused by the sudden reaction of the crowd. Joel Osteen also noticed the commotion. His assistant leaned in again, whispering quickly, "People are saying he's some kind of African leader." Joel's eyes narrowed with concern. He hadn't expected this at all. The atmosphere in the church began to shift. What started as a routine action by security was turning into a moment of tension and curiosity. Who was this man really? Why did the boy recognize him when no one else did? And why did he walk with such calmness, as if nothing could shake him? Ibrahim himself remained silent. He didn't explain, didn't argue, didn't try to prove his identity. He simply allowed the guards to guide him, even as the whispers grew louder. His quietness made him seem even more mysterious. By the time he reached the edge of the hall, half the congregation was buzzing with questions. Some people began searching Ibrahim Traoré on their phones. Pictures started to appear. Faces of recognition spread across the rows. The truth was slowly coming to light, but Joel Osteen still didn't fully understand who he had just asked to be removed from his service. And in that silence, with thousands of eyes watching, the stage was set for something that no one in that church would forget. The guards continued walking with Ibrahim Traoré toward the exit. The hall was so large that every step he took seemed to echo in the air. Many people followed him with their eyes, whispering to one another. Some leaned close to their neighbors, asking, "What did he do?" Others guessed, maybe he tried to sit in the wrong seat. But the calmness on Ibrahim's face made people doubt those guesses. His body language was not like someone in trouble, it was more like someone at peace with himself. When they reached halfway down the aisle, the young boy who had spoken earlier stood up again. His little voice cut through the noise of the congregation. "I know him," he said louder this time. "He's Captain Ibrahim Traoré. He's not just a man you're making a mistake." This time his words did not fade away. People turned toward him, and his voice carried far enough that even those on the stage noticed. Joel Osteen paused for a second, his eyes narrowing as he tried to understand. At first, some laughed softly, thinking the boy might be imagining things. But the boy's father looked worried. He tried to pull his son back down, whispering, "Please sit, don't interrupt the service." Yet the boy was determined. He pointed toward Ibrahim and repeated, "That's him, Dad. I saw him on the news. He's the president of Burkina Faso." The word president spread like sparks through dry grass. People sitting near them repeated it in low voices. "Did he say president?" one woman asked. "What country?" "Burkina Faso," another whispered, pulling out her phone to check. Soon the glow of smartphone screens filled the room as dozens of people started searching his name. Within moments, images appeared: photos of Ibrahim Traoré in military uniform, pictures of him giving speeches, videos of him with world leaders. The more people looked, the more they realized the boy was telling the truth. The whispers turned into a low buzz, and the buzz became a wave of surprise rolling through the audience. "It's really him," someone said. "He's a leader." The guards holding Ibrahim by the arm hesitated. They were trained to follow instructions, but now they were unsure. Their eyes met briefly, and both of them slowed their steps. One of them leaned slightly toward Ibrahim and asked in a softer tone, "Sir, are you really the president of Burkina Faso?" Ibrahim smiled gently, still calm. He did not brag, nor did he deny. He simply answered, "I am here as a believer, not as a president. But yes, I am Ibrahim Traoré." His voice was steady, without pride or anger. The guards froze. Their hands loosened, and they looked toward the stage for guidance. Joel Osteen's assistant leaned in close to whisper urgently into his ear. Joel frowned, clearly unsettled. He had not known this before. He had assumed Ibrahim was just another visitor sitting in the wrong place, and his instruction to remove him now felt heavy. Meanwhile, the congregation had already caught on. Some people gasped. Others shook their heads, shocked that such a mistake was happening right before their eyes. A few even stood halfway up, trying to get a better look at Ibrahim as he continued to walk quietly. The boy's words had changed everything. Suddenly, the story was no longer about an unknown man being escorted out. It was about a respected leader being asked to leave. And it was happening in front of thousands of people and even more watching through cameras. Ibrahim noticed the change in the room. He saw the eyes filled with surprise, the fingers pointing, the phones raised to capture the moment. Yet he did not let any of it disturb him. His steps were slow and steady. His face showed no anger, no embarrassment. He looked like a man who had chosen humility over pride. As he neared the exit, more whispers grew into clear voices. "Why are they escorting him out?" someone asked. "This isn't right," another said. "He didn't do anything." The tension in the air became so strong that even the choir, which had been humming softly in the background, grew quieter, sensing the mood of the crowd. Joel Osteen felt the pressure. He was a man used to large gatherings, but this moment was different. His carefully planned service was being overshadowed by something unexpected. His image, his church's image, and the attention of the audience were now focused entirely on this one man. Joel shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward his assistants. They whispered suggestions, but none of them seemed to fit the situation. Back in the aisle, the guards finally stopped walking. They could no longer continue pulling him out while the congregation stared and murmured. One of them asked Ibrahim respectfully, "Would you like to stay? The pastor can clarify." But Ibrahim simply shook his head lightly. "I came to listen. If I am asked to leave, I will go." The quietness in his words carried more power than shouting ever could. It showed humility, but also strength. The people who heard it were touched. They could feel he was a man of dignity. The boy, still standing with his father, shouted again, "Don't let him go. He's not just anyone. He's a good leader." This time, more people joined. Some clapped lightly, some nodded in agreement. The guards looked helpless. The decision was no longer theirs to make. It rested with Joel Osteen on the stage. Joel's heart raced. He hadn't realized the seriousness of the man's identity until now. He leaned again toward his elder, who whispered quickly, "Pastor, that's truly him. He's a respected African leader." Joel swallowed hard, his smile stiff as he faced the crowd. He knew he had to decide what to do before the situation grew worse. But Ibrahim himself remained silent, standing calmly by the guards. His hands were free, his face peaceful. The only thing he carried was a quiet presence that made people respect him even more. He did not argue for his position, did not use his title, and did not demand anything. He only stood as a man who had come to worship. By now, the atmosphere in the church was charged with curiosity, surprise, and even shame. People wondered what Joel Osteen would do next. Would he welcome Ibrahim back, or would he let him walk out? Cameras were already recording. Phones were already streaming the moment live. Whatever happened next would not stay hidden inside the walls of the church, it would spread far beyond. And in that moment, before anyone could predict what would happen, Joel Osteen finally realized the weight of his earlier instruction. His heart sank as he understood that he had nearly asked his guards to remove a respected leader, a guest who had entered quietly to worship like any other believer. The service that morning was no longer just another sermon. It had turned into a moment of truth, one that would soon test not just Joel Osteen, but everyone watching. The news that the man being escorted out was President Ibrahim Traoré spread through the church like wildfire. It was no longer a quiet whisper. People in the back rows leaned forward, people in the middle rows were pulling out their phones, and those near the front were pointing, trying to confirm for themselves. Within minutes, half the congregation knew exactly who he was. The boy's words had opened the door, and the internet had done the rest. The guards, who had started with firm steps, now moved awkwardly. They weren't sure if they should keep going or stop. Every time they looked at Ibrahim, they felt uneasy. His calmness made it difficult to treat him like an ordinary man causing trouble. His steady walk and gentle face gave the impression of someone who carried quiet authority. They turned their heads slightly, waiting for a signal from the stage. Joel Osteen, standing in front of thousands of people, began to feel a kind of pressure he had not felt in years. His church was known for inspiration, for smiles, for messages of hope. But now, the eyes of the entire room were on him, expecting him to correct what had just happened. His assistant leaned into his ear and whispered urgently, "Pastor, the congregation is finding out. He really is the president of Burkina Faso. It's all over the phones already." Joel's face tightened. The cameras, which were supposed to be focusing on the choir and the stage, had slowly begun to capture the unusual scene unfolding in the aisle. The operators knew something dramatic was happening, and instinct told them not to miss it. One camera zoomed in slightly, catching the moment Ibrahim calmly placed his hands behind his back, as though showing that he had nothing to hide. That image, even before the service ended, was already being clipped and shared online. People sitting close to the aisle could hear Ibrahim's soft words to the guards. He had told them, "It's all right. I did not come for a title. I came only to listen." The sentence was simple, but it carried weight. The guards lowered their eyes, embarrassed, because they realized this was no ordinary visitor. The man they were escorting was someone who had more power and responsibility than almost anyone else in the room. Yet he carried himself with the humility of a common believer. The murmurs became louder. "This doesn't look right," one woman said aloud. Another added, "Why would they ask him to leave? He hasn't done anything wrong." Soon, small clusters of people began nodding in agreement. The tension was thick, and Joel Osteen knew the service couldn't go forward until he addressed it. At that moment, an elder from the church rushed toward Joel, whispering quickly, "Pastor, this is serious. You need to welcome him back." Joel's heart raced. For years, he had built his church's reputation on welcoming everyone. But his earlier instruction now threatened to undo that image. His instinct had been to protect order and appearance, but it had turned into something far bigger than he expected. Meanwhile, Ibrahim's identity was no longer a secret. Clips of him walking quietly down the aisle, surrounded by guards, were already being uploaded to social media. Within minutes, people outside the church were commenting. Words like humility, leader, and unbelievable began to appear in online captions. Some even criticized the church for judging a man by his appearance. The story was spreading even as the moment unfolded. The guards, sensing the change, stopped completely. They could not take him any further. They looked at Ibrahim, unsure what to do. He gave them a small smile and said again, "Do not worry. I hold no anger. I respect your duty." His tone was so calm that it almost comforted them. They nodded slowly, feeling both relieved and ashamed. Joel finally stepped forward, microphone in hand. His smile was practiced, but his eyes betrayed his discomfort. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice slightly shaky, "we welcome all people here. Sometimes we make mistakes, but our heart is always open. Let's honor our guest today." He gestured for Ibrahim to return to his seat. The congregation clapped, though some did so politely while others clapped with genuine relief. All eyes turned back toward Ibrahim, who remained standing calmly where the guards had stopped. He gave a small nod and began walking back toward the front. His steps were steady, unhurried. The clapping grew louder, building into applause that filled the hall. People stood up, moved by the dignity of the moment. When he reached the front, Joel extended his hand quickly, trying to repair the situation. But Ibrahim did something unexpected. Instead of shaking Joel's hand right away, he asked softly for the microphone. Joel hesitated. For a moment, he wasn't sure whether it was wise to hand over the microphone to someone he didn't fully know. But the atmosphere in the room left him little choice. Slowly, he handed it over. Ibrahim held the microphone with both hands, standing quietly for a few seconds before speaking. His pause drew the attention of every ear in the room. Then he said in a calm and clear voice, "Leadership is not measured by the clothes we wear or the seats we are given. Leadership is measured by how we serve the people." His words echoed across the hall, and the silence that followed was powerful. The congregation leaned forward, hanging on to every word. Ibrahim continued, "I did not come here today as a president. I came as a believer, just like you. I did not need a special seat. I only needed a place to sit and listen." His voice was firm yet gentle, filled with sincerity. The effect was immediate. People began nodding, some even whispering amen. The message touched hearts because it was simple, true, and spoken from experience. The guards felt their eyes burn with guilt, realizing they had nearly removed someone who had not asked for anything but respect. Joel Osteen, standing just a few feet away, looked visibly humbled. His polished smile was gone, replaced by a more serious expression. Cameras captured every moment. The image of Ibrahim standing with the microphone, speaking about humility and service, was already spreading. Social media platforms were filling with comments from viewers who were amazed by his words. "True leadership," one post read. "Look at his calmness," another said. People compared his humility with the grandeur of the stage around him, and the contrast was striking. The congregation broke into applause again, this time louder, this time with genuine admiration. Some people stood to their feet, clapping with both hands raised. Others wiped their eyes quietly, touched by the unexpected lesson. Even those who had come only for music or entertainment were moved by the truth of his words. Joel Osteen tried to smile again, but it was clear the spotlight had shifted. The sermon that morning would no longer be remembered for his message. Instead, it would be remembered for the moment a simple man, dressed plainly, stood before thousands and reminded them what real leadership looked like. And yet, Ibrahim did not linger in the spotlight. After finishing his short words, he handed the microphone back with both hands, bowing his head slightly. He did not demand more time. He did not use the moment to promote himself. He simply returned to his seat, sitting down quietly as though nothing extraordinary had happened. The congregation erupted once more, unable to stay silent. They clapped and cheered, some even chanting his name. And still, Ibrahim sat calmly, hands folded, face peaceful. He had not come for applause. He had come to listen. Joel Osteen, now visibly humbled, turned back to the crowd. He tried to continue with the service, but it was clear to everyone that the real sermon had already been delivered. The sound of applause still echoed in the hall after Ibrahim finished speaking. The congregation was standing, clapping, and some even cheering his name. The moment felt alive, and people could sense they had witnessed something different from a normal Sunday service. Ibrahim had spoken only a few sentences, yet his words carried more weight than hours of preaching. He had not tried to impress anyone. He had simply spoken truth, and truth has a way of touching hearts deeply. Joel Osteen stood beside him, holding the microphone again, but the atmosphere was no longer in his control. He smiled, nodding, trying to look comfortable, but inside he felt a storm. His mind raced. For years, he had been the one guiding the service, setting the tone, and delivering the message. But now, in only a few minutes, this quiet man from Africa had shifted the spotlight. The people weren't looking at Joel anymore, their eyes were fixed on Ibrahim, the man who had just been asked to leave but instead gave them a lesson in humility. Joel tried to regain balance. "We thank our guest for those words," he said quickly, forcing a brighter tone. "And now, let's continue with today's service." His voice sounded calm on the microphone, but in his heart, he knew the moment could not be brushed aside. The congregation was still buzzing with energy. People whispered to each other, some saying, "That was powerful," while others nodded, "He's right. That's real leadership." The security guards quietly returned to their posts, still embarrassed. They kept glancing toward Ibrahim, who had now sat back down, looking as though nothing had happened. He placed his hands on his knees and watched the stage with focus, as if he were just another visitor. This simple act amazed many people. A president, a leader of millions, sitting like a humble believer in the front row without asking for attention. It made the crowd respect him even more. Joel tried to continue with the service. The choir sang louder, the music filled the hall, and Joel spoke with his usual charm, telling stories and quoting scripture. But the energy in the room was different. People listened politely, but their minds kept returning to what they had just seen. The image of Ibrahim standing with the microphone, reminding them that leadership was about service, was fresh in their memory. Some people couldn't stop talking. In the back rows, groups of young people whispered excitedly. "Did you see how calm he was?" one said. Another added, "He didn't even get angry. If that were me, I would have shouted." An older woman nearby shook her head slowly and said, "That man carries dignity. You can see it in his eyes." These conversations spread like quiet rivers through the crowd, and though Joel spoke on stage, he could not control where people's hearts and minds were focused. A few minutes later, Joel decided to address the situation more directly. He paused and looked at the audience. "You know," he said with a softer tone, "sometimes God sends us reminders in unexpected ways. Today, we have a guest who has shown us the power of humility. Let us welcome him properly." He gestured toward Ibrahim, trying to bring back unity in the room. The audience clapped again, louder than before. Joel walked closer to Ibrahim, extending his hand again. This time Ibrahim stood and shook his hand warmly. The cameras zoomed in, capturing the handshake. Joel then said, "Would you honor us by sitting here," and pointed toward a chair near the stage reserved for honored guests. The entire hall waited for Ibrahim's response. He looked at Joel, then at the crowd, and finally back at the seat. With a small smile, he shook his head. "Thank you," he said gently, "but I am fine where I am." His refusal was not rude. It was polite, graceful, and filled with meaning. He did not want to sit higher than anyone else. He wanted to remain with the people, as he had chosen from the start. The audience broke into applause again. They admired his choice even more. To them, his simple decision to stay in the same seat was louder than 1,000 speeches. He had shown what it meant to value humility over status. Joel's smile wavered for a second, but he nodded quickly and said, "All right, as you wish." He tried to keep the service moving, but the truth was clear: this day would be remembered not for Joel's sermon, but for Ibrahim's actions. As the choir sang again, Ibrahim closed his eyes and listened. His face was calm, and he seemed unaffected by the attention around him. To him, this was not about power, pride, or making a statement. It was simply about worship. And the people could feel it. His presence had turned the service into something much deeper. Word of the incident spread outside the church. People watching the live broadcast on television and online began sharing the clip. Within an hour, social media platforms were full of videos titled, "President Traoré shows humility at Joel Osteen's church." Comments flooded in from all over the world. Some wrote, "This is the kind of leader the world needs." Others said, "A true example of servant leadership." The story was moving far beyond the walls of the church. Inside the building, the service continued, but everyone knew they had witnessed something special. Even those who came in with heavy hearts left with lighter steps. Some whispered as they walked out later, "I didn't come expecting this today. That man touched my heart." Others said, "God used him to show us something important." Joel Osteen himself was quiet after the service ended. He smiled for the cameras, greeted people as he always did, but deep inside he was thoughtful. He had made a mistake by judging too quickly, but the humility of Ibrahim had turned that mistake into a lesson for everyone, including Joel himself. Later, Joel asked to meet Ibrahim privately. When they spoke, Joel apologized sincerely. "I am sorry," he said. "I didn't know who you were. I thought you were just another visitor sitting where you shouldn't." Ibrahim smiled gently and answered, "It is all right. Leadership is not about where we sit. It is about how we serve." His words repeated the same truth he had shared earlier, and Joel nodded quietly, knowing he had much to reflect on. That day, the entire congregation carried home a story they would never forget. They had come expecting music, teaching, and encouragement, but they left with a living example of humility. And they would tell their families and friends, "We saw a president sit among us like an ordinary man. And we saw him teach us a lesson without raising his voice." The moment would live on in videos, in memories, and in hearts. People realized greatness doesn't always wear crowns or sit in the highest seats. Sometimes it walks quietly in plain clothes, sits among ordinary people, and speaks a few simple words that change everything. And in the middle of it all, Ibrahim sat back down, listening, calm and humble, as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Yet everyone knew they had witnessed a moment that would echo far beyond that Sunday morning. The church service came to an end that morning, but the moment stayed alive in the hearts of everyone present. As the final prayer was said, people could not stop glancing toward Ibrahim Traoré. Some wanted to shake his hand, others wanted to simply look at him one more time, and many wanted to thank him for what he had done without even trying. His few words had carried more power than the loudest speeches. His calmness had taught them something about leadership, humility, and true faith. When the last song ended, people began leaving their seats. Usually, they would head straight for the doors, but that day many walked toward the front, where Ibrahim sat quietly. He had not moved, not rushed to leave, not tried to escape the attention. He sat peacefully, his hands folded, waiting for the crowd to clear. But the crowd did not move away from him, they moved toward him. One by one, people began to greet him. A woman with gray hair walked up, holding her Bible close to her chest. "Thank you," she said softly. "You reminded me today that leadership is about serving." Ibrahim smiled and nodded gently, replying, "We are all servants in one way or another." His words made her eyes fill with tears. She walked away slowly, still moved. Next came a group of young men, each holding their phones, nervous but excited. They asked, "Sir, can we take a picture with you?" Ibrahim laughed softly, not with pride but with warmth. "Of course," he said. They stood beside him, and someone snapped a photo. The young men walked away smiling, already planning to share the story with their friends. Soon, more and more people gathered around him. They did not come because of his title. They came because they had seen his character. People from different backgrounds, families, students, elders spoke to him for a moment, shaking his hand, thanking him for his example. He did not rush them. He looked into each face, listening, answering softly, showing patience and kindness. Meanwhile, Joel Osteen stood a little to the side, watching. His heart was heavy with mixed feelings. He had started the morning in full control, with the stage, the lights, and the message all centered on him. But now, he saw how a man who entered quietly, without fanfare, had captured the hearts of his congregation with humility alone. Joel realized that what people would remember from that day was not his sermon but Ibrahim's presence. After greeting so many, Ibrahim finally stood. He did not act like a man in a hurry. He moved slowly toward the exit, shaking hands with anyone who reached out to him along the way. People parted to let him through, but they leaned forward, smiling, clapping softly as he passed. It was almost as if they were giving him an honor guard, not because he demanded it but because they respected him deeply. Outside the church, the sun was shining brightly. A small group of people had already gathered, waiting to catch a glimpse of him. Some had seen the live stream and rushed to the church, hoping to see the man whose words were already trending online. When Ibrahim stepped outside, they clapped again. He raised his hand slightly in greeting, but nothing in his manner showed pride. He simply smiled, then began walking toward a car that had been arranged for him. Joel Osteen followed closely behind, determined to speak to him one last time. "Captain Traoré," Joel said softly, "I want to thank you for your grace today. I made a mistake in judgment. I hope you can forgive me." Ibrahim stopped, turned toward him, and replied gently, "There is nothing to forgive. We are all human. What matters is what we learn from each moment." His words sank deep into Joel's heart. Joel extended his hand once more, this time with genuine humility. Ibrahim shook it warmly. There were no cameras between them, no microphones, just two men speaking honestly. Joel said, "You gave this church a lesson it will never forget. And you gave me one too." Ibrahim smiled again. "Then it was worth coming," he answered simply. As Ibrahim stepped into the car, the people outside waved. Some shouted blessings, others whispered prayers for him. The car drove away slowly, but the image of him leaving, humble and calm, stayed in their minds. Inside the church, people were still buzzing. Conversations filled the hallways and parking lot. "I've never seen anything like that," one man said. He could have been angry, but instead he spoke with peace. Another added, "That's the kind of leader we need in the world." Families talked about it in their cars as they drove home. Children asked their parents, "Why did he say leadership is about serving?" Parents explained, "Because real leaders put others first." By the afternoon, the story had spread far beyond Houston. News channels picked it up, showing clips of Ibrahim standing in Joel Osteen's church, speaking calmly to the congregation. Headlines read, "African President Shows Humility in U.S. Church and Unexpected Lesson in Leadership at Joel Osteen's Service." Social media exploded with comments. People from different countries shared the video, praising Ibrahim's calmness and his message. In Burkina Faso, the news reached his people quickly. They saw their leader sitting humbly in a foreign church, treated like an ordinary man, and yet responding with dignity. Many felt proud. "That's our president," they said. He shows the world what humility looks like. His example strengthened their respect for him even more. Back in Houston, Joel Osteen sat in his office, replaying the moment in his mind. The service that was supposed to be like any other had turned into something unforgettable. He realized that God had used Ibrahim to send a reminder not just to the church but also to him personally. It was a reminder that appearances do not define people, and true greatness often comes quietly, without announcement. In the weeks that followed, people continued talking about it. Some called it the Sunday of Humility. Others said it was the day Joel Osteen's church learned a lesson about judging too quickly. Videos of Ibrahim's short speech kept circulating, gathering millions of views. His calm face, his steady words, and his simple message touched people across the world. And Ibrahim? He returned to his duties as president, carrying the same humility he had shown that morning. To him, it was just another day of being true to himself. But to the thousands who had seen him, it was a day they would tell their children and grandchildren about. They would say, "We once saw a leader sit among us, dressed plainly, treated like an ordinary man, and he showed us what true leadership means." The story became more than an event. It became a lesson. A lesson that reminded people everywhere that titles, seats, and appearances do not make a person great. What makes someone great is the ability to serve with humility, to stay calm in the face of misunderstanding, and to lift others with simple truth. That Sunday morning would be remembered not for the polished sermon, not for the music, not for the lights. It would be remembered for a man who walked in quietly, who was almost removed, but who chose to teach by example. A man who showed that true power is not in demanding respect but in earning it through humility. And so, long after the applause faded, long after the videos stopped trending, the memory of that moment stayed alive. It lived in the hearts of the congregation, in the minds of those who watched online, and in the pride of the people of Burkina Faso. For them, and for many around the world, it was a reminder that greatness is not about being served, it is about serving others.